From the Cronkite studios in downtown Phoenix, this is Cronkite News.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us for this special edition of Cronkite News. Tonight, we're taking a look back at our coverage of sustainability issues that include the state's drought plan to a road project using recycled asphalt.
Time is up for Arizona legislators to come to a decision on how to use less water. It's part of a multi-state effort to combat water shortages across the Colorado River Basin, which encompasses 7 states, including Arizona.
Arizona is the last state to sign off on what's called the Drought Contingency Plan. The plan will manage water usage from the Colorado River reservoirs and invest in longer-term infrastructure. This will make sure the state's largest source of water doesn't hit a critical low. If lawmakers can't agree, the federal government will step in to decide how to keep enough water in reservoirs like Lake Mead. Cronkite News reporter Lillian Donahue has been following this story and went to Pinal County to talk to some of the people who will be most affected by the plan.
All this water from the Colorado River has had quite the journey. Well over 300 miles of it in the Central Arizona Project Canal System. It can take up to 7 days for this water to go from the Colorado River to Pinal County, where I'm standing, the heart of Arizona's agriculture.
Corn and grains and pretty much a lot of what you'd expect here in Pinal County as far as crops.
Brian Rhodes owns the expansive A&B farms near Eloy, Arizona, about an hour southeast of Phoenix.
We've grown this farming operation pretty much from scratch. I mean, we're farming 15,000 plus acres today.
His most critical resource cuts through his alfalfa fields. The Central Arizona Project carries over 1.5 million acre feet of water each year and brings life to his crops.
We're going to all have to adjust to kind of a new frontier as far as water availability and from what we've been used to.
After nearly 20 years of drought in the Colorado River Basin and declining water levels at Lake Mead, Rhodes and other farmers are going to have to change the way they use water for agriculture, including changing the crops they grow to how they water the fields.
And what it does is it saves water consumption substantially.
The fate of his farm and many others are in the hands of a multi-state planning effort that will allocate water from the Colorado River and make millions of dollars available for more sustainable water infrastructure.
There's more water going out of Lake Mead than coming in.
Sarah Porter with Arizona State University's Kyle Center for Water Policy says that the Drought Contingency Plan helps solidify, at least in the short term, ways to protect groundwater in the Southwest.
The last thing we want is uncertainty. It's always better in water to kind of have control over your destiny.
The plan goes through 2026, but in the long term, experts say that farmers like Rhodes will have to wean off Colorado River water and implement more sustainable practices.
All of those farms at this point have to be efficient in order to still be in business today. And so the management of that infrastructure after it's been approved will be enough to carry them through for quite some time.
Arizona has had a long history of being able to plan for the future, and this is just another part of that.
And these are our fields on both sides of the canal here.
A&B Farms has already begun thinking ahead. Leveling some cotton fields to reduce water is a small price to pay for a more certain farming future.
I've got a 6-year-old son that loves coming to the farm every Saturday. My hope is that there'll be water and then we'll be able to be doing this when he's old enough to kind of get into the business.
In Eloy, Lillian Donahue, Cronkite News.
Arizona has an estimated 100,000 abandoned mines across the state. It's been at least a decade since anyone has died in one of them, but officials say it's only a matter of time. Cronkite News has spent months investigating why these mines aren't being closed off. Reporter Bryce Newberry found out funding is one of the biggest challenges.
In October, mine safety came front and center when 60-year-old John Waddell fell to the bottom of a 100-foot mine shaft.
All right, John, you're out. How you doing?
He was rescued after nearly 3 days in the dark.
I didn't know anyone was coming for me. I thought I was going to die.
At least 35 people have died in Arizona's abandoned mines since 1969. State officials know how dangerous they are, but there are only 2 people charged with working to make these mines safer.
Tom and I, he goes that way and I go this way. So we're all by ourselves. It ain't safe.
Jerry Tyra inspects mines across the state. Many of them are easy to access. We came across several while hiking near Bullhead City. Only one was fenced off. Nearly 9,000 mines are mapped on state land. More than 2,000 of them are closed off.
We fenced off the ones that are fairly easy to get to.
And that, I think, has made a big difference.
But not in all cases. There's signs all around this one that says, abandoned mines, stay out, stay alive. And down here, you can actually see there's a hole in the fence, so anybody could just crawl through there, and back in the back is where the hole is. Since not all mines are fenced in, the Maricopa County Sheriff's Mountain Rescue Posse is called on to save people. How many times has your team had to do this type of rescue?
Abandoned mine shafts or active mine shafts, we average about one of these about every 12 to 16 months.
But that number doesn't match data provided by the Arizona State Mine Inspector. The office says only 23 people have been injured in the last 49 years. That number is based largely on media reports the office tracks. The office has asked the state legislature for about $350,000 every year for more inspectors like Jerry Tyra. So far, lawmakers have turned down that request. Cronkite News reviewed state budget records and found that ASMI's budget has not significantly changed since at least 2007. We repeatedly asked the governor's office for an interview about the budget for the state mine inspector's office. A spokeswoman for Governor Ducey said his office works closely with state agencies to ensure public safety. Near Bullhead City, Bryce Newberry, Cronkite News.
John Waddell, who was rescued from a mine in October, is no longer in the hospital, but is still recovering from a broken leg and ankle.
Arizona has thousands of old mines that have been abandoned. But as Cronkite News reporter Cammie Clark explains, bats and other animals use these mines as homes. So the challenge is to preserve their habitat while also keeping people safe.
It's no easy task to build gates for mines.
Let's say the bats are using the site and you want to protect the wildlife also. Then we build grates. Basically, it's like a steel with, usually it's a 6-inch gap between the bars. 6 inches is a nice size for flying for certain species of bats that live in Arizona.
And this makes Joel Diamond happy. He researches bats that live in abandoned mines.
In Arizona, we have 28 bat species, and we manage these abandoned mines as bat habitat. Unfortunately, some of these abandoned mines are also a public nuisance. They're also dangerous features.
Since 1969, at least 35 people have died in abandoned mines in Arizona. That's according to the Arizona State Mine Inspector's office. Diamond says these old mines are often unstable and have bad air quality. Signs like this help warn of the dangers, but they don't keep everyone out.
We've also developed 3 additional methods: a modified culvert gate, spider wire, and an installed rebar grate. These 3 methodologies are more cost effective. I can put a lot more gates in an area, protect a lot more habitat for humans and for the biological value for bats.
That's where Gilliland comes in. Federal agencies, including the Bureau of Land Management, contract with him to make these gates. Usually it takes a week to install, but some of these installations, he says, stand out.
We did some by Buckeye where we had killer bees attacking us while we're building the gates. So we're wearing complete bee suits while we're building the gates. That happened also south of Tucson too.
But Diamond says these risks are worth it because bats play a key role in Arizona's ecosystem.
If you disturb a bat colony, oftentimes it'll lead to the collapse of that bat colony. So be nice to them. They're like little flying monkeys. For abandoned mines, stay out, stay alive.
Gilliland says that he's made approximately 250 mine gates so far and is currently working on a project in New Mexico. In Prescott, Cammie Clark, Cronkite News.
Some of the bat species in Arizona, such as the Mexican long-tongued bat, pollinate desert plants like agave, while the lesser long-nosed bats help pollinate saguaros, according to the National Park Service.
Arizona has a long history of mining, but thousands of mines across the state have been left abandoned, and people have fallen into them. Some have even died. But as Cronkite News reporter Jordan Evans found out, there's one group of volunteers in Lake Havasu City that are trying to close the mines off to keep people safe.
It's the sound of metal. Pounding stakes, snipping wire. All of this to put up a message.
We're a group of 75-year-olds, and we just enjoy getting out in the desert. We enjoy doing this kind of work. No one could pay us to do it, but we just enjoy volunteer doing it.
It's not just about putting the pedal to the metal. The Havasu Four-Wheelers Club is also here to prevent accidents waiting to happen by fencing off Arizona's abandoned mines.
It's an opportunity for us to do something safe, give back to the community, and maybe save somebody's life.
The Arizona State Mine Inspector says there are thousands of mines like these that pose a threat to hikers and off-roaders. And since there are numerous challenges that make it difficult to close them off, that's where the Havasu Four-Wheelers Club comes in.
The ones we work on range anywhere from 20 to 250 feet. And sometimes you'll see debris piled up 20 feet down and think that that's the end of the shaft. It's actually just a collection of dust and debris, and if you step on it, it'll collapse.
According to the State Mine Inspector's Office, 35 people have died in Arizona's abandoned mines since 1969. More than 20 people have been injured, including John Waddell, who recently survived a 50-foot fall into a mine shaft in West Maricopa County. The Havasu Four-Wheelers Club works closely with the Bureau of Land Management. BLM told me that many of these club members have signed up as volunteers, and they have done great work with the agency, and we appreciate their efforts.
We have a cooperative agreement, a volunteer agreement with BLM. They provide all of the materials and most of the equipment. They also give us technical advice, and they accompany us out to make sure we're being safe in what we're doing.
Bowen, who is a club member, says the work they do is important because even they have had a close call.
We had one of our club members, their grandson, in another location was on a motorcycle and went in a hole like that. Sometimes it's hard work, but it's not really work. I mean, work is anything you do when you'd rather be doing something else. And a lot of us are out here because it's fun.
Watch for snakes.
In Lake Havasu City, Jordan Evans, Cronkite News.
Right now, there's a section of I-10 about an hour south of Phoenix that's been under construction since 2017. It's being expanded from 4 lanes to 6, and what's being done with the old asphalt is unique. Cronkite News reporter Bain Franny explains.
Streets like the ones behind me are made of asphalt. The stretch that ADOT is building from here to Tucson is actually using their old road to make a new one.
About 80 million tons of asphalt is recycled every year throughout the U.S. Most of that asphalt gets trucked off-site to be recycled. Arizona Department of Transportation is using that material from the I-10 construction a little differently.
Instead of going a distance off, getting the dirt, hauling it all back, taking the time and expense that takes, we're going over here 200 yards. We're actually reusing a freeway built in the mid-60s to build a modern freeway right here.
ADOT has torn out the old lanes near the town of Picacho to build the 4 miles of new road. The old asphalt and other materials are being broken up on site.
It's been very important to us to try to preserve the beauty that is Arizona and not make an impact any more than we have to.
The old lanes lasted over 50 years, and Herman believes this new road will last just as long. Arizona State professor Camille Kalouche says recycled materials can be just as effective as new materials in roads.
So if it's designed correctly and added at the proper percentage, it will be just as good as the virgin material or the new construction.
Recycled materials on or near the construction site is also better for the environment.
Savings in money, saving in energy, cost, fuels, and of course the impact on the environment in terms of CO2 emissions, the global warming and the climate change and everything else. So it provides a great benefit in that direction.
The I-10 construction is expected to be finished by this fall. In downtown Phoenix, I'm Bain Franny, Cronkite News.
Your air travel last year is partly to blame for a spike in carbon dioxide levels in the U.S. Reporter Lillian Donahue is joining us now with more on how emissions from jet fuel, trucks, and cars all contributed to this increase. Lillian?
It's a chain effect. The New York-based research group Rhodium says a higher demand for trucking and air travel last year increased carbon dioxide emissions across the country. I visited a local lab where scientists are trying to fix the problem.
Alan Wright directs Arizona State University's Center for Negative Carbon Emissions, where they are developing a sort of CO2 sponge.
It has dried and given off water vapor, and as it gives off water, it soaks up CO2.
Wright says his research could one day help counter the invisible danger of rising carbon dioxide in the air.
Most of the scientific community believe now that removing the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere is going to be a necessary component of the strategies that we will use to deal with this rising CO2 level in the environment.
Preliminary data released by the New York-based research group Rhodium shows that national CO2 emissions increased by 3.4% in 2018. It's the second largest annual gain in more than 2 decades. Transportation remained the largest source of CO2 emissions in the U.S. for the 3rd year in a row. Jet and diesel fuel make up the majority, although Wright says everyday vehicles still have an impact.
This is a bag of sand that has a pound of sand in it. If a car gets 20 miles to the gallon, that's the weight of the carbon dioxide that you put in the air every single mile you drive.
There are more vehicles hitting the roadways each year. According to the Arizona Department of Transportation, vehicle registration has gone up from 7.9 million to 8.5 in just 2 years. But Maricopa County officials say those cars and trucks contribute to an even larger problem: high ozone levels. This forms when volatile organic compounds found in emissions mix with intense sunlight.
Well, here in Arizona, we have CO2, but the levels are extremely low. The automobiles, businesses, they contribute to the ozone. That's the biggest concern here.
Hune says the county's working to lower emission levels by monitoring ozone and urging commuters to carpool. However, Wright says that although carbon dioxide levels remain consistently low locally, it's a national concern that will eventually affect everyone.
We as a people, as a responsible social organism, have a responsibility to take care of the garbage that we put into the environment as a result of our day-to-day living.
The Rhodium Group notes they don't expect to see a comparable uptick in carbon dioxide levels this year. That's because they expect an economic slowdown and continued closures of coal-powered energy plants across the country. In the broadcast center, Lillian Donahue, Cronkite News. 2 Arizona artists came together to create a colorful and playful take on what Arizona's environmental future could look like.
Cronkite News reporter Gabrielle Oliveira takes us inside the exhibit in Chandler.
In the eyes of artists Daniel Funkhauser and Sarah Hurwitz, this is what Arizona could look like one day. Mutant cacti, a mountain made of trash, colorful plastic bags. They call it Futureland, Arizona.
Futureland, Arizona is a post-apocalyptic sci-fi experience made from collaborative show between me and Sarah Hurwitz.
But Funkhauser and Hurwitz say the show isn't about making a political statement about Arizona's environment.
It wasn't totally our intention to make this political piece about the environment, but I think it still is important. I mean, it's something that we all have an impact on in our daily lives, and I think as artists, we sort of just reflect what's around us and what we're thinking about.
Like Sarah said, we weren't trying to be political or, make too much of a statement about climate change, but it's obviously on our minds.
Peter Bugg is the one who brought Funkhauser and Hurwitz together to create the show. He says their creation has an important message.
Sort of lightheartedness so that people can think about this really important topic of what are we going to do here in the summers in 50 years, and is it going to be a good place to live then?
And that's a big question. According to the Arizona State Climate Office, temperatures in the state are increasing overall, and that it's likely to be warmer in 50 years. But as to how much warmer, scientists say they don't know. In Chandler, Gabrielle Oliveira, Cronkite News.
Futureland, Arizona will be on display through February 15th at the Vision Gallery in downtown Chandler.
He was lost, but now he's found. Researchers are founding that red snap, and he's become a bit of a celebrity, and how he's helping researchers learn more about this species that's in danger because of development. Cronkite News reporter Gabrielle Oliveira introduces us to red snap.
This pile of trash at the Rio Salado Habitat Restoration Area might not look like much, but it was once home to a burrowing owl named Red Snap.
So they were trapped safely, humanely, when they were living in this trash pile, and they were fitted both with bands, with the colored bands.
And that's how Red Snap got his name.
So they were part of a 2-year study out of the New Mexico State University, looking at the success of relocated burrowing owls. So the reason that we know the fate of the snaps is that they were wearing these transmitters.
New Mexico State researchers lost the radio signal for Red Snap in the summer of 2018. They thought they'd seen the last of him. Until recently, when a hiker spotted an owl with a red tag and sent it to Audubon, Arizona. When Kathy Weiss saw the photo, she says she knew who the owl was immediately.
We're very surprised that he's back at the same area that he was at before. So it's exciting. It means that he may re-nest.
His original mate, Whitesnap, died, although Weiss says they aren't sure how. Janon Reedon is with New Mexico State University. She volunteers to build these artificial burrows for owls like Redsnap and studies their behavior.
The development is pushing them to look for new habitat, and if they don't have the habitat, then they end up finding spots that aren't very good burrows, so they'll find a pipe to live in and something like that. So it gives the burrows give them a safe place to go and raise a family.
This artificial burrow is now home for Redsnap as he looks for another mate. He's also become a bit of a local celebrity after being featured in a story in the Washington Post.
Stories like this that people can relate to animals, and I do that all the time. When you get to know these animals, they have personalities, they do different things, so that gets people attached and caring about the wildlife and animals.
In Phoenix, Gabrielle Oliveira, Cronkite News.
Burrowing owls are protected under the Migratory Bird Act, but the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service reports their numbers are declining, in large part because of development. Arizona's smallest fish hatchery near Flagstaff is undergoing a more than $3 million renovation. As Cronkite News reporter Alexis Hermanson explains, the renovations are meant to help raise fish with less water.
This construction site used to be home to trout and other fish, but they're all gone so that Sterling Springs Hatchery can be renovated. Cindy Dunn oversees 3 of the 6 Arizona hatcheries. She says this hatchery needed renovations the most.
The outside raceways were built in the 70s, and the pipe is probably from the 50s.
The stabilizer here is sinking, so there's no support for the pipes anymore.
Hatchery manager David Fox says these repairs will help them use their water efficiently to keep productivity up. This pipe, for example, will be lined to help retain water that comes from the springs. Jeffrey Rabinovich is the statewide hatchery product manager for Arizona Game and Fish. He says one improvement will help reduce water use.
That will allow partial recirculate or pump back the water, filter the water and pump back to the facility to be reused in the times of the year when there is more demand for water.
The fish eggs are hatched here.
They start swimming up and touching the surface. They grab a gulp of air to fill their air bladder, and then they kind of stabilize, and then they'll start looking for feed.
And when they've grown to 3 inches, they move to the Page Springs Hatchery that's 40 minutes south of Sedona.
It's vital for that to stay in good working order for Page Springs to do the same.
The Page Springs Hatchery is tackling water use too. The hatchery measures water flow and injects oxygen to keep water quality up.
Before, I think that a lot of people have the opinion that raising fish in a facility is having water, having some fish and throwing feed. And probably that's in the past. All the innovations and the technology that we are applying or the new things that we're implementing, we are right there among the other states.
Here at Page Springs, more than half of Arizona's stock trout are raised, and these fish feed a multi-billion-dollar sport fishing industry. At the Page Springs Hatchery, Alexis Hermanson, Cronkite News.
Renovations at Sterling Springs will be completed by late June. The crew will then test their new systems before bringing the fish back.
It's finally warming up here in the valley, which means perfect weather for hiking. So Cronkite News reporter Claire Kelly went out to take a closer look at some of the colorful things you might come across while visiting Arizona state parks.
Without rain, there can't be flowers. But as you all know, Arizona has had a lot of rain over the past couple of months.
Because we had so much rain this winter, the Arizona state parks are not only very green and lush, but they are also shaping up for a beautiful wildflower season. I went on a hike with State Park Ranger Matt Downs in Lost Dutchman State Park to check out all of the wildflowers that are already starting to bloom.
So some of the wildflower species that we have here in Arizona somewhat depend on elevation. So when we were higher up on the mountain, we were seeing a higher variety of some of the wildflower species. Seeing a lot more lupins. We're seeing some filary, but down here as you come off the mountain, for the most part, you're really only seeing a lot of the brittle bush out here. Every once in a while you'll find some of the smaller species that are kind of just hanging out independently, but for the most part you're just kind of seeing brittle bush. So that's why it's nice if you're ever going to come into the park, try to head up a little higher, you're actually going to kind of get your money's worth of wildflowers.
When going on your hike, make sure to take some pictures. Photographer Amy Horn gives us some tips on shooting wildflowers.
You tend to have more success for the flowers in the morning because if we're going to have any wind that day, first thing in the morning you tend to have less wind. And if you're trying to take a close-up picture of flowers, if the wind is blowing, it's going to move your subject and cause a blurry image. So I would recommend morning photography, use the tripod, and get out there and just notice everything around you.
It is not illegal to pick the flowers, but it is illegal to take anything out of a state park.
You can kind of see that it's already starting to wilt and die off, and now no one else gets to see this flower pretty much. It'll break down and kind of go back into the earth, but you know, we always say don't pick the wildflowers for your grandchildren. It's kind of like the saying that a lot of places like to say.
Besides Lost Dutchman State Park, you can also find wildflowers in bloom at Catalina State Park and Lake Pleasant Regional Park. Claire Kelly, Cronkite News.
That's it for this special edition of Cronkite News. Thank you for joining us. For top Arizona stories anytime, go to cronkitenews.azpbs.org.